Hi, my name's Ruben Milne. Welcome to this third episode in the second series of Think Global, brought to you by the International Growth Team at Google. Now, this episode is going to focus on probably the most important part of any successful business, whether that's domestic or international, and that's the customers, the consumers, if you will. And I'm really excited to welcome our guest for this particular episode, who has a vast amount of experience in connecting with exactly those consumers, those customers across borders in various roles for renowned international brands such as MTV and Lego. So before we sit down and actually have an interview with him, I thought I'd give him the opportunity to introduce himself via a series of quick fire questions. The first of which is probably the simplest. Who are you?
My name is Lars Silberbauer. I have worked all over the world, lived in London, lived in New York. I'm a Danish of origin, but I've worked and always have worked and focused on creating digital transformation in the companies that I've worked in and making sure that the brands that I've worked with have become relevant to new audiences, but still kept the brand DNA that has made them successful.
So if you didn't choose this career path, what do you think you'd be doing right now, Lars?
I really hope that my career would have ended in the music business instead of the only digital business and marketing business. I was a musician growing up, so I would have loved to keep that. But at some point, you actually need to have a real job, unless you're one of the big celebrities.
Not a bad plan B. What would you say your professional mantra is, Lars?
My professional mantra would definitely be about you need to go ahead and do things. You need to go ahead and do it and learn from it instead of just waiting and analyzing things.
In your experience, and you've had an awful lot of experience, what's the most valuable skill or attribute when it comes to successful international growth?
I think it's a lot about actually going places, learning about different cultures, knowing how things work. Both because you learn about new things, but also it teaches you about the biases that you might have yourself. So I think it's getting out there and getting on the planes and visiting people and working with them. I think that's some of the most learning experiences that you can actually have.
That makes an awful lot of sense. And what do you wish you'd known when you got involved in your first international venture, Lars?
I wish I would have known the tremendous success of digital platforms. I had a hunch when I got into that area and very early on, but actually having known how much it's going to control businesses nowadays would have been nice to know very much early on.
Excellent. And finally, in one sentence, give the viewers who tuned in today a reason to keep watching until the end of this interview, Lars.
The international markets are a huge growth opportunity, and I hope that we will bring some insights to how you can leverage that in the next 20-30 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Lars. Great to meet you, and I'm really looking forward to our interview. So thank you so much for joining us, Lars. I'm really looking forward to for the next 20 minutes or so. So episodes 1 and 2, we looked at the economic background behind the opportunity for international trade and international growth, and then also how to make the most of that opportunity from an operational standpoint. Now, in both of those conversations, we talked a little bit about the acceleration of digitization of the world and consumers in general. And I think particularly with reference to a very key period in many people's calendars, which is just coming up. So that's the peak holiday season. Obviously, that works for us as marketeers because it means we can communicate with consumers all over the world, regardless of where they are and regardless of where we are. But do you think that there is nevertheless still an appetite there for that, Lars?
Absolutely. And I think this is a once in a decade or once in a lifetime opportunity because the world has changed. The world has disrupted. But now we have an upcoming holiday season. We have Black Friday, Cyber Monday, which are always huge points of engagement and hugely important for marketeers and for consumers as well. And we are in a situation where a lot of brands have lost their physical touch points to some degree. You can no longer rely on basically having the shelf space that would always attract customers. You need to get the digital shelf space as well. And you have new entrants in pretty much all categories trying to get in front of the older or the bigger brands there. So I think this upcoming holiday season is going to be like really a massive point of engagement, and it's going to decide who's going to be winning businesses in the next decade.
So if we as marketeers are looking to support our companies in terms of this international expansion, and yet there's all of these changes going on around the world throughout these unprecedented times, do you have any kind of advice in terms of how we can make sure we keep on top of those trends, Lars?
It's a big challenge, of course, to stay on top of the trends. There's a lot of data coming in. There's so many changes happening in across markets, across consumer segments, but there's also a lot of tools available. And I think both like Google is both doing the Google Trends and Google Market Finder, which I think are good starting points to actually simplify things and simplify a lot of the data so you can start taking action on it. And I did that myself when I was at Lego, especially, to really get a first grasp and an initial insight into what might be relevant markets to approach. So I think by using platforms, by using some frameworks for decision and processes, it's way easier to actually make decisions and to oversee and control a global development as we see right now.
And it's interesting. So I get the fact that we use these trends and insights at the planning stage when it comes to the work we do. But how does that play out when it comes to actually executing on those plans, the actual doing of it internationally?
In a world where consumers are moving as fast as they are and digital trends are moving as fast as they are, it's important for all companies to really like test and learn continuously, not just A/B test, but really continuously test and learn on different levels of your content, your campaigns, your media spend, and so on. And just an example that we did at Lego was that we basically re-edited a piece of video content 3 times before we had the final version, but the 2 or 3 previous versions would also go live with paid media, addressing the specific target group. Then we would pull it down, take it down, re-edit it. Basically, like everything would be re-edited based on brand affinity, search uplift, and retention of the audience on that specific content. And what we could see here was that by editing and re-editing the content based on the data, the new data we just got in, we could make huge amount of additional impact on each piece of individual content. So it's not just about doing like A and B test once and for all. It's about continuously learning and trying things out and building on what we've learned in the previous tests.
Wonderful. So that iterative desire to keep getting better and keep improving comes through all the way through into execution. Now, that actually speaks to my next question in a way, which is that obviously any international marketing campaign will come across so many differences and so many nuances, etc. I mean, is what you're saying that it's about creating a different campaign for each individual market that we're thinking of entering?
No, I would definitely not promote that opinion, because I think what we do learn as marketeers and my own hobby horse is that all markets, yes, there are nuances, but all markets are not so special because people are not so special. People have a lot of commonalities, a lot of similarities, the family structures, the things we love, how we react during a pandemic, that is actually something we have in common. And if you try to build campaigns and try to build consumer engagement, which I prefer instead of marketing campaigns, then you can actually feed on and leverage those commonalities and human behaviors, as if you wish. And I think that is actually what is scalable across borders, across markets, instead of just focusing on what is unique for one market and trying to do a customized solution for each market, which of course is not really financially adequate or makes sense economically in the long run.
You know, that makes an awful lot of sense, Lars. As you said, very much marketing 101. As I said at the start, this talk of fundamental consistencies does tie in really nicely to the most recent piece of research published by Google, Decoding Decisions, the Messy Middle. And that's really interesting, I think, particularly in the context of entering new markets, because the research focuses on 6 marketing tactics and techniques that are rooted in behavioral science, which help consumers make their final purchasing decision, takes them from trigger to purchase. And it suggests that a combination of them would work across all sectors and all markets. And it's that thought that the fundamental role that those behaviors play in the purchase journey for any consumer that I think makes a really interesting conversation as part of this interview. So looking at those 6 consumer behaviors, do you recognize any of them specifically that worked for you and some of the international campaigns you've put together?
If you go back to the very, very basics, you need to show up. You need to be there. Like if you are reliant on a bricks and mortar store somewhere and you're not showing up on digital during COVID, then you will not show up anywhere. So I think first and foremost, we need to make sure that we show up as brands. That's the most critical thing.
As you said, it is kind of going back to the basics, but I think it's worth remembering, isn't it? And interesting, that's also a big part of the decoding decisions, the messy middle piece. And on that note, Lars, I know it's something that we've both spoken about before in terms of those 6 characteristics. Are there any of those particular behaviors that you recognize from working internationally that connect and resonate across markets?
Definitely. And I think all marketeers, when they read the research, I think it's very comprehensive. They'll definitely be connecting with at least parts of it. I would say to me, what I really related to was like the power of now. So being like basically showing up, but also being present and being relevant at the timely place and channel. Social proof was another one. So basically making sure that you are aware of the social context and that you empower your content with social promotion or social endorsements. I think that's something that I can definitely relate to. And finally, embed a certain amount of scarcity in your purchase opportunity or in your campaign to make sure that the people are incentivized to take action right away. I think those 3 are definitely something that I can relate to and have seen that if you embed that into campaigns, it can be extremely successful.
And are there any particular campaigns that you can remember where you think, actually, I did have those pieces come together and it made a large difference?
I would hope it would be all of the campaigns I've done in all the projects, because it's such a human behavior, how we make decisions. But I would just say like one big project that is very easily linked to this was a project that I did at Lego together with a clothing company, where we basically designed Lego clothes for the 18 to 24-year-old. And typically that audience is very, very difficult for Lego to reach, because they've stopped playing with Lego bricks and Lego sets, and they haven't become parents yet. So they're not buying as parents and they're not buying as kids. But we did a unique, exclusive, limited clothing line that would be tapping into those 3 about being here, right now, giving people a purchase opportunity right at the moment they saw it, making it limited, and then of course embedding that in a lot of social content and social proof around that product. And it went like extremely well. We got like huge amount of awareness about this project, and we sold out in less than 4 days.
And I guess sold out across markets, regardless of geographies. Thank you for that, Lars. That makes a huge amount of sense. One of the things that we talked about in both of the previous episodes was a little bit of the urgency driven by the upcoming peak holiday season. Now, bearing in mind all of the fluctuations and all of the changes throughout the world that's happening at this time. Again, from a marketing point of view, how on earth do we keep on top of this? How on earth do we make sure that we are being as effective in terms of our marketing campaigns as we can through this peak holiday season?
I think first and foremost, we need to acknowledge that the challenge is real. Like this is not something that is easily done. It takes a lot of work. The audiences are fragmenting. All audiences are moving at a different pace. And some of them are moving extremely fast. The technology is changing, and we still need to reach more and more audiences. And what I'm also saying is that we need to reach them not just with one piece of content. We need to do continuous A/B testing across like large scale audiences, and it's a challenge. Like the complexity is extreme, especially, and I think it's impossible to handle if we are trying to apply the tools from yesterday to the challenges of today and tomorrow. And that is typically how it's done in a lot of different companies still. While you do slide decks and you evaluate campaigns and then you change things 3 months later. Instead, we need to take a step back and figure out how much can we actually put into automation? What do we not need to do? How can we let like machine learning and different pieces of software solve this for us? And how can we change an organization to step up and solve strategic challenges, be more focused on them, be more focused on how we can change the strategy for the future as a company and as a brand, and leave the day-to-day low-level decision-making to automation. I think that's the only way we can go about it if we want to succeed in the future.
Wise words indeed, Lars. Thank you very much. And it's interesting, that final point, I think, connects really nicely to what you were talking about right at the start in terms of taking the leap, actually doing something rather than sitting and thinking, reflecting too much. So look, thank you ever so much for your time today. Thank you very much for sharing your wisdom and insight with us all.
Thank you, Ruben. It was a pleasure to be part of it, and take care.
Well, once again, thank you very much, Lars. And I'd also like to say thank you for everyone who's watching, and leave you with a reminder of 3 little things. First of all, that you can access a whole host of free tools and information just by clicking on the resources tab at the top of the screen, including things that we spoke about today, Google Trends and Market Finder. Please also don't forget to leave us feedback in the tab on the right hand side of your screen. It's always good to know how well these videos are working. And thirdly and finally, please don't forget to continue your Think Global journey by joining us for the 4th and final episode in the series. In the meantime, once again, thank you very much for watching, and take care.